expecting to just bully a few rogue pirates.
Right, the usual bounty stuff.
Exactly. But then suddenly your warning systems are just screaming. You realize the crosshairs of a Vanduul capital ship killer are locking right onto your hull.
Yeah, that is a terrifying way to wake up.
It really is. And, I mean, in seconds, it's preparing to turn your multi-million credit warship into just glowing slag. So, welcome to the new reality of Alpha 4.8.
It's a whole new game now.
It really is. And I want to say welcome directly to you, the listener, and specifically a highly targeted welcome to the members of the 907th.
Yes, absolutely. Welcome.
Because today's deep dive, we are making this a custom-tailored audio guide designed exclusively for your organization. Because quite frankly, the universe is fundamentally changing.
It is. The days of soloing large combat missions are over.
Right, or just casually brute-forcing your way through a bounty. Those days are officially gone.
Yeah, it's a profound shift in the game's architecture, really. I mean, for well over 10 years, the persistent universe has offered this massive sandbox of activities.
Like deep core mining, hull salvaging, dynamic cargo hauling, all that stuff.
Exactly. But when it came to combat, your primary activity was usually fighting other ships in relatively straightforward, localized engagements, you know?
Yeah, you'd fly to a beacon, shoot the bad guys, and fly away. Pretty simple.
Right. But with the mid-2026 release of Alpha 4.8, we are looking at a massive paradigm shift. The developers are moving entirely away from those bite-sized encounters.
And we are here to break down exactly what that means. We are specifically focusing on the newly announced Tactical Strike Group's gameplay loop.
Which is huge.
It's massive.
Yeah.
This isn't just a new mission type. It is a multi-role, multi-crew cooperative spaceship event.
Designed to stress test every single discipline your organization can muster.
Right, from your ace pilots down to your logistics officers who are, sweating over fuel reserves.
Everyone has a job now.
Exactly. So our mission today is to dissect the mechanics, the underlying physics, the threats, and the strategic requirements of each specific mission phase.
We want the 907 to be perfectly prepared.
Yes. We want you to be able to perfectly plan your fleet composition, your weapon loadouts, and your ground tactics before you even think about spooling your quantum drives.
And to map all of this out, we are pulling directly from the latest Roberts Space Industries Roadmap Roundup.
Plus the massive technical reveals from CitizenCon 2025.
Right, and the in-depth developer breakdowns focusing on the Alpha 4.8 engine upgrades. What we have here, essentially, is a blueprint.
A blueprint for genuine MMO-style raid mechanics entering the persistent universe.
Yeah, we are talking about multi-stage, mechanically complex operations that require highly coordinated problem-solving.
Under extreme fire, no less.
Exactly.
So let's bypass the generalities and put the 907th right in the pilot seat. Let's set the stage. The contract comes through from Intersect Defense Solutions.
Okay, yes.
Where exactly in the universe are we heading? And why does the environment itself matter so much for this operation?
Well, the lore and the environmental setup here are crucial. They directly impact your operational visibility and your flight parameters. The location is the Nyx system.
Deep within the Glacian Belt, right?
Exactly, deep inside the Glacian Belt. Now, for the newer members of the 907th, it's important to understand the context of Nyx.
Yeah, it's not Stanton.
No, not at all. This isn't the corporate, highly policed playground of the Stanton system. And it's not the complete, lawless, radiation-soaked wasteland of Pyro either.
It sits somewhere in the middle, right? Like a remote, rugged frontier system.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
I always think of it like an old-school gold rush town.
Yeah.
Silverado or Deadwood in space.
That is a perfect analogy.
It's the kind of place where people go to live off the grid, outside the suffocating pressure and taxes of the United Empire of Earth.
Right. It's dusty, it's dangerous, but it has its own sort of frontier code.
Yeah. And the Glacian Belt itself is an incredibly atmospheric and treacherous place to operate.
It really is. It is a massive asteroid belt set against this dark, incredibly dense, hazy gas cloud.
But what you really need to pay attention to is the physical environment you'll be flying through.
Yes. The developers have completely overhauled the volumetric cloud tech and the asteroid generation for this specific belt.
The rocks in Nyx aren't just your generic rounded space potatoes anymore.
No, they have a sharp, icy, almost shattered glass appearance. They are jagged cliffs floating in the void.
And because the Nyx system directly borders Vanduul space, the developers have created this brilliant visual indicator in the environment.
It's so cool. If you look closely through certain gaps in the dense gas clouds, you can actually see the faint, ominous red light of Vanduul space.
Just bleeding through the particulate matter.
Exactly.
So if your nav officer points your ship toward that red glow, you are literally flying into the mouth of the beast.
You are.
That is such a cool atmospheric touch.
Yeah.
It lets the environment itself warn you of the overarching threat.
Yeah, it's brilliant environmental storytelling.
But let's get down to the actual contract. Intersect Defense Solutions is paying the bills here. Why is the 907th flying into this icy red-tinted asteroid belt in the first place? What's the objective?
Well, Intersect Defense Solutions is the leading military defense contractor for the UE Navy.
Right.
And the Navy, legally and politically, doesn't just call up random civilian orgs for Black Ops work. They use Intersect as a proxy to keep their hands clean.
That makes sense. Plausible deniability.
Exactly. And Intersect's intelligence division has discovered that illegal, highly advanced military-grade technology is being sold on the black market within the UEE.
And they've traced it to Nix.
Yes. They've traced the source of this tech back to an old, massive, abandoned QV Planet Services logistics station. It's hidden deep inside the Glacian Belt.
Okay, I want to pause on QV Planet Services for a second, because understanding what this station was built for really explains why it's so massive.
Yeah, it's important context.
For context, QV was a massive corporate mining entity a few decades ago. They tried to extract resources from Nix, poured billions into building these colossal logistical hubs.
Huge investments.
Right. And then they realized the profit margins were too slim because of the sheer distance to major trade hubs, and basically went bankrupt.
They just left everything.
Yeah, they just abandoned all their massive infrastructure out in the dark because it was too expensive to dismantle.
And for decades, that station has just been a dead, frozen tomb. But recently, it mysteriously came back online.
Massive energy spikes were detected.
Exactly. Now, simultaneously, the People's Alliance, which is the main scrappy peacekeeping force in Nix, based out of the Delamar asteroid, sent a recon team to investigate.
To check out the energy spikes.
Right. And that team was ambushed, their ships were destroyed, and key members of their leadership were taken hostage and dragged inside the station.
Okay, so you have a twofold mission here.
Yes. Intersect wants the illegal tech investigated and secured. The People's Alliance wants their people back. And Intersect has hired the 907th to execute the raid.
All right, so the 907's fleet drops out of Quantum. You weave your way through the sharp, icy asteroids, your sensors pushing through the dense gas clouds.
And this massive station finally reveals itself.
Paint a picture for the flight leads. What are we actually looking at?
It is a sprawling, broken behemoth. The architecture is a mix of the old, skeletal Panama-style stations you might recognize if you've flown around Pyro.
Okay, yeah.
But heavily modified and bulked out by QV Planet Services for heavy industrial lifting.
Right.
It has 3 very large, distinct mechanical arms extending outward for miles. And right in the center, nestled securely between those arms, you will see a massive, highly armored central energy core.
And the moment you arrive, the stealth approach is entirely out the window. It is absolute chaos.
And they know you're there.
You'll immediately spot a People's Alliance Idris capital ship parked on the outskirts of the station.
Yeah.
But it is not a calm rendezvous.
No, that Idris is actively taking fire. It's being harassed by an unknown enemy faction.
The mysterious group that has taken over this station and kidnapped the recon team.
Exactly. And this brings us to the immediate tactical requirement of Phase 1, securing the airspace.
Okay. Phase 1.
The 907th's first objective is straightforward but resource-intensive. You must clear out the waves of enemy fighter ships attacking the People's Alliance Idris.
See, my first instinct as a commander, if I drop out of Quantum and see a bunch of medium fighters harassing a friendly Idris, is to just roll up my own Org's Polaris Corvette.
Oh, yeah.
Or, our own Idris, and completely flatten the station's airspace from 10 kilometers out. If the 907th has the big guns, why bother with a complicated dogfight? Why not just bring the hammer down immediately?
Because if you do that, you will lose your capital ship in approximately 30 seconds.
Wait, really? Just instantly?
Basically, yeah. Your raid will be over before it begins. The developers explicitly designed this encounter to punish that exact mindset. Bringing a capital ship close to the station during Phase 1 is a guaranteed death sentence. This unknown faction has somehow managed to secure, reverse engineer, and incorporate stolen Vanduul capital ship killing turrets into the station's exterior defenses.
Hold on. Vanduul capital ship killing turrets. On an old Human corporate mining station. That shouldn't even be compatible with human power grids.
It shouldn't, which is exactly why Intersect is so terrified of this technology.
That makes total sense.
And here is where the mechanical reality of the 4.8 targeting matrix comes into play. These turrets are programmed with a very specific, highly tuned threat assessment matrix.
How does it work?
They completely ignore small and medium signatures. A Gladius, an Arrow, or even a Vanguard Warden can buzz right past them, and the turrets won't even track them.
Seriously, they just don't care about fighters.
Not at all. The tracking gimbals are too heavy to lock onto nimble targets anyway, but the moment their sensors detect the massive cross-section and immense electromagnetic signature of a Polaris or an Idris...
Let me guess. They wake up?
Oh, they wake up. They will lock on, bypass standard countermeasures, and absolutely shred the hull with heavy plasma bombardments. You cannot brute force this phase with capital ships.
So the 907 has to hold their capital ships back, out of range. That means deploying a highly coordinated mix of light, medium, or heavy fighters to establish total space superiority around the exterior of the station.
Yes, this is a pure dogfighting phase.
Whatever your ace pilots prefer to fly to thin the herd, this is their moment.
Exactly. I like to think of it like clearing the bouncers outside of a high-security vault. It's the straightforward brute force necessary to get to the actual puzzle.
That's a good way to put it.
And that leads to a critical operational pivot. Once your fighter wings have dismantled the enemy patrols and secured the airspace around the People's Alliance Aegis, you are still left with the problem of those massive cat killer turrets.
Right. They are still active.
And until they are down, your big ships cannot move in to support the next phase.
Which means the fighters just swoop in, target the turrets, and blow them up. Right. Problem solved.
You'd think so, but here's where the developers introduce a massive mechanical roadblock that completely changes how orgs need to plan their weapon loadouts.
Okay, what's the catch?
The turrets themselves are protected by a completely unprecedented type of shield technology. They are completely invulnerable to direct fire.
Wait, invulnerable, not just like really tough or highly resistant. We hear invulnerable in video games and usually think it just means we need a bigger gun.
No, I mean mechanically, mathematically invulnerable within the game engine.
Wow.
Your size 9 torpedoes will do nothing. Your heavy laser cannons will splash against them uselessly. Your Gatling guns will bounce right off.
So you literally cannot scratch them.
You cannot. The turrets cannot be destroyed directly while their localized shields are up. Every single environmental puzzle in this raid has a specific mechanical solution.
So what's the solution here?
To bring down the turret shields, the 907th must target a series of heavily armored power relays that are scattered across the station's massive exterior hull.
Okay, target the power relays to drop the turret shields. That sounds like standard raid mechanics.
It does, but
Here's where it gets really interesting, and where the 907's quartermasters and loadout planners need to pay very, very close attention. There is a massive wrinkle here. It's a complete meta shift for how orgs usually outfit their ships.
it really is. This is the defining tactical hurdle of Phase 2, which we can call the ballistic check.
I love that name. The ballistic check.
Because these power relays, scattered across the hull, have their own unique localized shields, and those shields are completely 100% resistant to energy-based attacks.
Wait, let's unpack this for a second, because this is huge. Our pilots love their laser repeaters.
Everyone does.
Almost everyone runs energy weapons because it is the standard, most comfortable meta. You never run out of ammo. You just manage your weapon capacitor, let it recharge, and keep shooting.
Exactly.
You're telling me that the standard laser meta, the loadout 90% of the player base uses, is completely functionally useless for this objective.
Completely useless, and that is highly intentional game design.
Oh, they knew what they were doing.
The developers have the back-end data. They know exactly how much the community relies on laser repeaters to avoid the logistical hassle of rearming.
Right.
They have explicitly designed this phase to force a change in strategy. The enemy faction has shielded these relays specifically against the most common type of attack. Therefore, to crack these relays, the 907th absolutely must bring explosive or heavy ballistic ordnance.
So mechanically, how does ballistic damage interact with these relay shields in the 4.8 engine compared to energy damage? Why does one work and not the other?
It comes down to how the new physics engine handles shield penetration and armor values.
Okay.
Energy weapons are designed to strip standard shields, but these specific relay shields have an infinite energy absorption rate. They just eat lasers all day.
You just absorb it like a sponge.
Exactly. Ballistic weapons, however, fire physical projectiles. In Alpha 4.8, Ballistic rounds carry physical mass and kinetic energy.
Right, they have actual weight to them.
Yes. When a massive ballistic round hits these specialized shields, a percentage of that kinetic energy actually penetrates the shield barrier and transfers directly into the armored housing of the relay beneath it.
So you aren't actually dropping the relay shield, you are punching through it with physical mass to destroy the delicate machinery inside.
Precisely. You need weapons that deliver massive physical alpha damage.
And for newer players, alpha damage refers to weapons that deliver a huge, devastating spike of damage in a single hit.
Right, like a massive cannon shell or a torpedo.
Rather than a steady low-damage stream over time like a laser repeater, you need that massive kinetic spike to shatter the relay's internal components.
Yes. So what does this mean for the 907th's fleet composition before they even launch?
Well, it means this is the moment for your dedicated bomber wings and heavy fighters to shine. You need ships like the Aegis Retaliator or the Vanduul Gladiator, equipped with heavy torpedoes. Or you need a dedicated wing of heavy fighters, maybe Vanguard Harbingers or Ares Infernos, that are specifically, exclusively equipped with heavy ballistic loadouts.
And that is a huge commitment.
It is, because keeping a ballistic loadout running in a protracted engagement is tough.
Very tough.
If I'm flying an Inferno, I have a massive ballistic Gatling gun, but once that ammo box is empty, I'm just a very heavily armored paperweight.
Right, you're done.
Which means the 907th has to plan their supply lines carefully. You can't just loiter forever when every trigger pull depletes your finite physical ammunition.
And that is the exact pressure the developers want you to feel. Taking down these relays requires time, precise coordination, and heavy munitions.
It's not a walk in the park.
No. Your ballistic fighters have to visually identify the relays against the dark, cluttered backdrop of the station, coordinate their fire to overwhelm the internal armor, and destroy the hardware.
All while dodging whatever lingering defensive fighters remain in the area.
Exactly. But let's say the 907th executes this perfectly.
Okay, let's say we nail it.
The heavy bombers deliver their payloads, the relays spark, overload, and blow. The invulnerable shields on the massive cap killer turrets finally drop, right?
That would be the logical next step, yeah.
Actually, no.
Wait, really?
No. And this is where the raid structure becomes truly brilliant. Destroying the exterior relays doesn't drop the turret shields directly.
Then what does it do?
It drops the localized shields protecting the massive blast doors that lead inside the station's superstructure.
Oh, wow.
The primary shield generator powering those turrets is still active, and it is located deep inside the central core of the facility.
Ah, okay. So the exterior relays were just the locks on the front door.
Exactly.
So the blast doors slowly grind open. But here's the problem. Your Retaliators and your Ares Infernos are way too sluggish to push inside a cramped station corridor.
They'd hit a wall in seconds.
Yeah, they are not built for tight spaces. This creates a massive bottleneck for the org. The strategy has to instantly pivot from heavy bombardment to microscopic precision. We are moving into Phase 3, threading the needle.
It is a profound shift in gameplay scale and pacing.
It really sounds like it.
You aren't just fighting in open space anymore, making wide, sweeping turns. You are now navigating a highly confined, intensely hostile, claustrophobic environment at high speeds.
Remember those 3 large arms of the station we mentioned during the arrival?
Yeah.
The ones extending outward?
Yeah. Each of those massive arms contains an internal maintenance trench that leads directly toward the central core.
And when you say trench?
I mean a narrow, hazard-filled tunnel. It is littered with exposed pipes, structural crossbeams, and derelict QV mining equipment.
I absolutely love this. It's a literal sci-fi trench run. You are flying straight into the belly of the beast.
It's pure adrenaline.
But think of the station's cooling system like a massive CPU heatsink covered in dust.
Wow.
You aren't going in there to blow up the processor directly. You're sending fighters in to snap the fan blades so the central core literally cooks itself from the inside out.
That is an excellent way to visualize the mechanics at play here. As your pilots hurtle down these enclosed corridors, they will see massive thermal cooling units lining the interior walls.
And those are the targets.
Yes. The objective is to target and destroy these specific cooling units as you pass, and then seamlessly loop out through another intersecting trench to escape before you crash into the central core housing.
This is where the 907th needs to deploy their absolute ace pilots, the hotshots.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you aren't just flying in a straight line shooting stationary targets. It's not a shooting gallery.
Far from it. The physical hazards are deadly enough, but the real threat is the shield generator itself.
Right, the one protecting the core.
Yes. The generator protecting the central core isn't just sitting there passively. It is actively venting massive amounts of localized distortion damage throughout the trench system as a defensive countermeasure.
Let's break down distortion damage for a second, because the 4.8 physics engine handles this differently than raw explosive damage. How exactly does distortion affect a ship flying at combat speeds?
Well, distortion weapons don't damage your physical hull.
Okay.
Instead, they overload your ship's electrical grid. In Alpha 4.8, as you fly through these distortion fields in the trench, the energy hits your ship's shields first. It rapidly drains your shield faces to zero.
Fast.
Very fast. Once the shields are down, the distortion energy bleeds directly into your ship's internal components, specifically your power plant and your cooling system.
And if your power plant takes too much distortion damage, it initiates an emergency shutdown to prevent a catastrophic overload.
Exactly. Your engines cut out, your maneuvering thrusters die, your HUD goes dark.
Oh, man.
And if your ship powers down while you are flying at 400 meters per second inside a narrow metal trench,
You're not going to slowly drift to a halt,
no, you are going to become a permanent fiery part of the station's architecture.
which dictates the exact type of ship you need for this phase. You cannot use those heavy, lumbering ballistic fighters anymore.
They would be a liability.
You need highly agile, highly responsive light fighters. Ships like the Gladius, the Arrow, or the Cartool.
Ships that can dodge physical crossbeams in a fraction of a second.
Right, but more importantly, ships where the pilot can actively manage their power triangle.
That's the mechanical key right there. Pilots will need to constantly shift power to their shields to absorb the distortion impacts, then instantly shift power to their weapons to strip the cooling units.
All while managing their heat sinks so their own components don't stall.
It requires incredible situational awareness and capacitor management.
And I imagine it's not a one-and-done pass.
Yeah.
You don't just fly through once and save the day.
No, not at all. Depending on the size of the strike group you brought, it will require multiple harrowing strafing runs.
Just whittling it down.
You are essentially bleeding the station's thermal capacity. As your ace pilots destroy more and more cooling units in the trenches, the massive armored power core in the center of the station loses its ability to vent heat.
And it begins to critically overheat.
Yes. And when a massive industrial power core overheats, the safety protocols force it to open up.
Just like a flower opening up to vent.
Correct. The thermal stress forces the thick armor plating around the core to retract, exposing its vulnerable glowing internals.
And it exposes them both from the inside of the trenches and from massive exterior exhaust ports on the outside of the station.
This is the crescendo of the space combat phase. This is the moment for the entire fleet to converge their fire.
So the 907th Fleet Commander has to coordinate the agile light fighters inside the trench who are firing at the internal core, while simultaneously ordering the heavy bombers and ballistic fighters outside to pound the exterior exhaust ports.
It's a synchronized strike from the inside out.
That sounds incredibly epic.
It is, and if the coordination holds and that core takes enough catastrophic damage, it goes critical and shuts down.
And when that central power core goes offline, those massive, invulnerable, capital ship-killing turrets on the exterior finally permanently power down.
They are dead.
The airspace is finally truly safe for the big ships. The Polaris and the Idris can finally move in.
But here is the massive logistical reality check.
Yeah, because we aren't done.
By the time those turrets go down, the 907's fighter wings have been working incredibly hard. They've cleared the initial fighter waves, they've expended massive amounts of expensive ballistic ammo and explosive torpedoes cracking the relays.
And your agile light fighters have had their components cooked and their shields stripped in the distortion trenches.
Your fleet is battered, bruised, and running completely dry on fuel and ammo.
See, if this were an older patch, say 3.24, this is where the immersion would completely break.
It really would.
Half the organization would have to hit their quantum drives, jump millions of kilometers away to a totally different space station, land, restock, and fly all the way back.
It totally broke the flow of a massive operation.
It was so frustrating. But Alpha 4.8 introduces an absolute game changer for organizational fleet mechanics. Hangar Tier 0.
This brings us to Phase 4, the mid-mission reset.
Let's really dig into the mechanics of Hangar Tier 0, because for the logistics officers in the 907th, this is the most important update of the year. What does this actually look like in practice?
Well, Hangar Tier 0 introduces fully functional in-ship hangar refueling, rearming, and repairing.
Which is a monumental shift.
It means your pilots can now literally fly their depleted fighters inside the physical hangars of select capital ships like the Aegis Idris or the RSI Polaris and conduct a full restock without ever leaving the battlefield.
But how does the interface work? Are they just magically given ammo when they land? Like you click a button, boom, full ammo.
No, the developers have physicalized the entire process to maintain immersion and mechanical depth.
Thank goodness.
When a pilot lands inside the Idris, they will connect to the ship's internal ATC.
Air traffic control.
Right. They use the exact same mobiGlas interface they would use at a major planetary space station. They request fuel, quantum matter, ballistic ammunition, and missiles.
And this is where it gets incredibly cool for the support players. The Idris doesn't just magically generate these supplies.
Yeah.
The capital ship has to actually carry them in its own cargo grid.
Exactly. The 907th's logistics crew aboard the capital ship will need to physically manage those supplies.
So they are down there moving boxes.
They might have to use tractor beams to move heavy ballistic ammo crates from the cargo hold into the hangar bay to resupply the landed fighters.
Furthermore, fuel transfer isn't instant.
No, the game calculates the flow rate based on the capital ship's internal pumps. It takes actual, measurable time to refill a completely empty heavy fighter.
Okay, but what if some members of the 907th are running a smaller op? What if they don't happen to have their own personal Idris to bring to the fight? Or what if the Org's capital ships are busy elsewhere in the system?
That's a good question.
Are the fighter pilots just out of luck? Forced to fly empty and eventually eject?
Not at all. And this is where the mission design shows incredible foresight. Remember that People's Alliance Idris we mentioned at the very beginning of the deep dive?
Right, the NPC ship we saved in Phase 1.
It wasn't just placed there for lore flavor. It is parked nearby precisely to act as a safe port in a storm.
Ah, okay.
The developers integrated it into the mission to ensure that even smaller orgs, or groups who don't have massive capital logistics ships yet, have a functional allied hub to top up their supplies.
That is incredibly generous of them.
You can land on the NPC Idris and utilize its Hangar Tier 0 capabilities, though you might be paying a premium in UEC for the supplies compared to using your own org stock.
Makes sense. Got to pay the NPC tax. So what does this all mean for the 907's operational planning? It sounds like you can't just have everyone land at once and grab a coffee.
It means logistics are no longer a boring background thought. They are a massive, active, high-stress part of the raid.
Fuel management is now a critical real-time factor.
Yes. Ships with shorter fuel ranges and tiny hydrogen intakes, like your dedicated light fighters, will absolutely rely on this refueling phase to stay in the fight.
The fleet commander has to schedule precise rotations. Who is landing to rearm? Who is holding the ATCQ? How long will the physical transfer of fuel take?
And most importantly, who is holding a defensive perimeter while half the fleet is parked with their engines off?
Because the fight isn't paused while you're in the pit stop. The universe doesn't care that you're out of missiles.
Precisely. Just as your fighters are queuing up to land, a brand new wave of enemy reinforcement ships drops out of quantum into the sector.
Of course they do.
And their specific AI scripting tells them to target the largest threat, which is the People's Alliance Idris, or your own capital ships conducting the refueling.
Oh, that is brutal.
Yeah.
So your logistics wing has to operate efficiently under immense pressure, physically moving ammo crates in the hangar, while your combat air patrols scramble to protect the very ship that is keeping your fleet operational.
It is chaos.
If the Idris goes down, the whole raid starves to death.
It's a brilliant way to keep the tension high while forcing multi-crew coordination. You cannot just be a good pilot, you have to be a good team player.
Okay, so the fighter wings are busy rearming, dodging fire, and frantically defending the capital ships out in the cold void of space. But we can't forget why we are actually here.
The whole point of the contract.
We haven't even touched the core objective of the entire contract. The People's Alliance hostages trapped inside the station.
Right. The airspace is secure enough to move in. We are moving into Phase 5. Boots on the ground.
You've secured the exterior, you've cracked the station's automated defenses, and you've established a logistical foothold. Now, the 907th must seamlessly transition from a massive naval fleet battle into a claustrophobic, highly tactical ground assault.
This is where your dropships and your marine fire teams finally take center stage.
You'll need to utilize armored personnel carriers. Ships like the Anvil Valkyrie, the Drake Cutlass Steel, or even the newly announced Anvil Paladin gunship.
The pilots of these ships have to carefully navigate through the massive debris field you just created, avoid the lingering wreckage of the enemy fighters, and physically dock or land at the station's designated breach points.
And once those airlock doors open, your FPS ground teams are stepping into a highly hostile, completely alien environment.
Remember, this station has been modified. They are going to face a massive onslaught of infantry from this unknown faction.
And the lore specifically highlights that this faction is wielding unfamiliar energy weapons and wearing strange, robust, highly advanced armor.
You are not fighting standard Ninetales Street pirates wearing t-shirts and wielding salvaged shotguns.
No, these guys are geared up.
These are heavily armed, highly organized defenders, holding tight corridors, using barricades, and locking down choke points. They know the layout. You don't.
So the question becomes, how does the 907's Marine Detachment survive a meat grinder like that? How do you push down a narrow hallway when there are 10 heavily armored enemies at the other end with a crossfire set up?
It's a tough tactical problem.
See, my thought would be to just spam conventional frag grenades, bounce them off the walls and hope for the best.
That would be the old way.
Right, but given how armor works in 4.8, I'm guessing shrapnel isn't going to cut it against this advanced tech.
You are exactly right. Conventional fragmentation will barely dent this new armor. This is where we need to look closely at the new FPS weapons and mechanics arriving in Alpha 4.8.
Specifically, a brand new piece of ordnance.
Yeah.
The Kastak Arms, or KSAR, plasma grenades.
Yes.
I saw the tech demo for these at CitizenCon. These things look incredibly nasty. How do they fundamentally change close quarters battle?
They are a phenomenal tactical addition because they introduce physicalized area denial.
Okay, break that down for us.
The KSAR plasma grenade doesn't just detonate with a concussive blast and throw shrapnel. When primed and thrown, the chemical reaction inside the casing creates a massive thermal spike.
Right.
Upon impact, it ruptures and creates a lingering, bubbling pool of highly damaging, superheated plasma on the floor and lower walls.
And how does that interact with the enemy armor?
Well, in the 4.8 physics engine, plasma damage specifically excels at melting through high-density armor plating over time.
Like acid.
Exactly. Anyone who walks through that plasma pool player or AI takes severe, rapid damage over time. It literally cooks them inside their suits before the thermal effect finally dissipates.
Think about what that means for breaching a space station. This is the ultimate tool for controlling the flow of combat.
It really is.
You are in a narrow maintenance corridor, taking heavy fire from an intersecting hallway. Your point man throws a KSAR plasma grenade into the intersection. You haven't just caused damage, you have completely, physically locked down that flank.
The enemy AI cannot push through that glowing pool of plasma without melting their unfamiliar armor and dying.
It allows the 907th to strategically compartmentalize the station. You use the plasma grenades to block off enemy reinforcement routes, funneling the defenders into your established firing lines as your fire teams methodically push forward, room by room, clearing corners.
It turns a chaotic firefight into a controlled, tactical dissection of the enemy forces.
So cool. And the ground team's primary objective is to fight their way through this onslaught, utilizing those plasma mechanics to locate the central holding area where the hostages are kept.
Yes, the detention block.
Once they secure the room, a player with a crypto key or hacking tool needs to physically slice the terminal to open the massive internal hangar doors from the inside to release the captives.
And once those doors open, the captive ship, usually a heavily armored transport, they manage to hide punches its thrusters and blasts out of the station into the asteroid field.
But the mission isn't just open the door and wave goodbye.
No, it's a full extraction. The 907th has to ensure those NPCs actually get to safety because the airspace is still incredibly hostile.
Which ties perfectly into another major piece of infrastructure mapped out for Alpha 4.8, the new QV extraction stations.
Yes, these are important.
These aren't the massive logistics hubs we're fighting in. These are specialized, smaller outposts located elsewhere in the NICS system.
They are explicitly designed by the developers to act as the secure drop-off points for these rescued NPCs.
The 907th Space Wings might need to form a physical escort around the captive's AI ship, protecting it from straggling enemy fighters as it calibrates its quantum drive.
Or, in some variations of the mission, your ground teams might have to physically load certain high-value injured hostages onto your own dropships.
And personally transport them to these QV stations to secure the final payout from Intersect Defense Solutions.
Right, you have to actually deliver the package.
Look at the incredible scope of what we just talked about. Let's recap this for the 907th.
It's a lot to take in.
In one continuous, unbroken session, your org has seamlessly transitioned from establishing space superiority in a massive fleet battle to a precision atmospheric trench run managing distortion physics.
And then to managing live, physicalized capital ship logistics and fuel queues.
To a claustrophobic SWAT-style breach, in clear, using plasma area denial, and finally to a VIP extraction escort.
It sounds exhausting, but incredibly rewarding.
The mission is over. We got the hostages. Let's go home, crack open a cruise, and count our UEC.
But here is the brilliant, brutal, and frankly terrifying escalation of the tactical strike group design.
Oh no, what did we miss?
You think the mission is over. The game wants you to think the mission is over. But remember back in Phase 3 when your ace pilots forced the central power core to overheat, and then the fleet blew it to pieces so the cap killer turrets would power down?
Yeah, it was a glorious explosion. Great job, team. High fives all around.
Well, destroying a massive, heavily armored industrial energy core deep in the glacial belt doesn't just create a cool visual effect.
It doesn't.
It creates a massive, system-wide electromagnetic and thermal signature. And by detonating that core, you just rang a very, very loud dinner bell for the absolute most dangerous apex predators in the sector.
Oh boy.
Welcome to Phase 6, the escalation.
Enter the Vanduul swarm.
Up until this exact moment, the entire raid has been the 907th versus the unknown human faction defending the station.
Right.
But the Vanduul, the terrifying alien race that has been at war with humanity for centuries, have been raiding the borders of the Nix system for months, probing for weaknesses.
Just waiting.
When that station core detonated, the resulting energy spike signaled to their listening posts that a massive human installation was heavily damaged and highly vulnerable.
And the Vanduul do not ignore wounded prey.
Never. A strict, unforgiving, hidden timer begins the moment that core dies.
The Vanduul drop out of quantum into the sector, and they don't trickle in one by one like low-level bounty targets.
No, they drop in huge, overwhelming hordes.
We're talking classic deadly glaives, aggressive, highly maneuverable blades, and a terrifying new addition coming to the persistent universe in 4.8, the Vanduul Stinger.
We really need to pause and analyze the Stinger because it completely changes the threat matrix for human pilots. The Stinger is a massive problem.
It looks mean.
It's a heavy fighter, roughly designed to compete with the absolute best the UEE military has to offer, like the F-8 Lightning or the RSI Scorpius.
But its design philosophy is completely alien.
Very alien.
How does it compare mechanically to an F-8 Lightning? If our pilots are flying heavy human fighters, what are they up against?
Well, the F-8 Lightning relies on a massive array of smaller, forward-facing weapons to overwhelm a target, combined with heavy, human armor plating.
It's a bruiser.
The Stinger, however, is built differently. It is incredibly tanky, armored with rare, jagged alien alloys that have incredibly high physical damage resistance.
So you cannot chip away at it easily.
No, but more terrifying is its armament. It packs an unrivaled amount of forward firepower, centered around a devastating ship-integrated size 5 plasma cannon.
A size 5 plasma cannon on a heavy fighter that will melt through standard human shields in a few hits.
And it doesn't rely on agility or fancy maneuvers. The Stinger's flight model is designed to brawl.
It wants to get right in your face.
It wants to point its nose directly at you, absorb your incoming fire with its alien alloy armor, and obliterate you with massive plasma blasts. If a Stinger gets a clean shot on a medium fighter, it will rip the ship in half.
And it's not just fighters pouring into the system. The developer sources confirm that if you stay in the sector long enough, if you try to hold the line, the game director will start spawning massive Vanduul capital ships.
Kingships and hunters dropping out of quantum to glass the area.
But here's the sheer madness of this phase, the absolute chaotic beauty that I want the 907th to visualize. The Vanduul aren't just there to hunt players.
No, and that's the most fascinating part of the AI subroutines.
They hate everybody.
The Vanduuls absolutely hate humanity, but they also hate the unknown faction running the station. Their AI is scripted to wreck everything in sight indiscriminately.
It instantly becomes a massive, chaotic, three-way battle.
Yes. You have Vanduul Stingers dogfighting the remaining station defenders. You have station defenders trying to shoot down the 907th dropships. And you have massive Vanduul capital ships hunting your idling Idris while it tries to refuel your fighters.
It is total, unmitigated carnage.
which requires absolute ironclad strategic discipline from the 907th's command staff.
This isn't a fight you can permanently win. This is an unending horde mode.
The game will endlessly spawn Vanduul until you are dead or you leave.
The Vanduul will keep coming, and they will come harder and heavier the longer you linger. Your org must decide on their exfiltration criteria long before you ever drop out of Kahneman Nex.
You have to draw a distinct line in the sand in your pre-flight briefing. You have two choices.
What are they?
Do you stand and fight? Do you test the absolute limits of your logistics team, pushing your hangar Tier 0 refueling to the braiding point? Do you push your ace pilots to farm the endless Vanduul waves for high-tier alien salvage, reputation, and the sheer glory of the kill?
Knowing that every minute you stay increases the chance of a total, devastating fleet wipe.
Or do you stick strictly to the objective? Do you hold the defensive line just long enough for the hostage transport to spool its quantum drive and warp to the QV extraction station? And the absolute millisecond they are clear, the fleet commander orders a full, coordinated bug-out.
All ships, school drives, jump on my mark.
Exactly. Coordination, communication, and ego management here are the only difference between a legendary, highly profitable org raid and a total, humiliating fleet wipe where everyone loses their customized gear and wakes up in a medical gown back at a hospital in Lefkey.
It is the ultimate test of organizational discipline. Knowing when to fold them when there's a Vanduul kingship bearing down on your position and your fighters are screaming that their ballistics are empty.
And that perfectly encapsulates why tactical strike groups are such a monumental, game-defining addition to Alpha 4.8.
They are finally bringing genuine, complex, deeply physicalized MMO-style raid mechanics to the persistent universe.
The scale of this operation demands a highly diverse lineup. You need dedicated logistics players who love managing inventory.
You need heavy ordnance bombers who understand armor penetration physics.
You need agile trench runners who can manage capacitor flow under pressure.
You need heavily armed marine dropships who understand close quarters plasma denial.
And above all, you need an airtight chain of command to manage the incredible chaos.
It truly is the end of the lone wolf meta for top-tier content. The 907th and any org that wants to tackle this is going to have to operate like a well-oiled, highly communicative machine.
Absolutely.
But before we wrap up this massive briefing, before you all go back to your hangars to theory-craft your ship loadouts, I want to leave the 907th with a chilling question to mull over. Something the lore team dropped into the patch notes that really got me thinking.
Let's hear it. What's the thread you're pulling on?
Think back to Phase 2. Think back to those massive, invulnerable turrets. The lore explicitly states that this mysterious, unknown human faction was somehow able to secure, reverse engineer, and perfectly integrate highly advanced Vanduul capital ship-killing technology into a derelict QV logistics station out in the middle of a freezing asteroid belt.
Yeah, that's no small feat.
They made alien tech work flawlessly on the human power grid, if they have the resources, the intelligence, and the audacity to pull that off.
Okay.
What else have they managed to build out there in the dark, uncharted corners of the Nyx system?
That is a very unsettling thought.
And when we finally track them down to their true stronghold, are we truly prepared for what they might unleash next?
A very sobering thought for the org's intelligence and recon divisions to consider as they scout the belt. The universe is getting much more dangerous.
Indeed it is. We want to thank you, the listener, for taking this custom, highly detailed deep dive with us today. To all the members of the 907th, review your loadouts, check your ballistic reserves, brief your Marines on plasma protocols, and good luck out there in the Franverse.
Yeah.
You're going to need it.